Alright, so much like my video trilogy on the original Plants vs. Zombies game, for this first video, let's kick things off by checking out pre-release aspects of the sequel here. More specifically, numerous concepts and ideas that were scrapped. And there's a ton of these that, yeah, there's really enough here for pretty much a whole video, so strap yourselves in. Also, I guess I should mention that since this game is still receiving updates with new plants and such over 10 years since its initial release, there's always a chance that some of these may end up being added in the future, but as of the making of this video, they ain't there. For starters, we have this unused concept of a boss fight against the Gargantuar zombie. This uses assets from the first game, so this appears to be from a very early point in development, presumably before most of, if any of the new assets were made yet. And yeah, here we can see some large cop cannons, as well as numerous sunflowers, pea shooters, and walnuts facing off against a horde of zombies, as well as the big boss himself. Seems like a pretty cool idea, though I'm not sure how well managing hundreds of plants would work in practice. Next, there are a few concept sketches for different background ideas, and interestingly, some of these seem to feature concepts of the gameplay being seen from a different perspective than normal. There's this lower angle point of view where we can see a massive zombie giant in the distance. There's a sketch for a wooded area, one for a fall season, as well as a winter one. And interestingly for this last one, we can see like a mostly frozen river run between the two banks where the plants could seemingly be placed. And this, I think, could have made for some pretty interesting gameplay. Next up, there are several concept sketches of levels and areas, some of which did make it into the game and some that didn't. For the ones that did, there are some conceptual sketches of the player's backyard area, a very early sketch of the ancient Egypt stage, where it looks like this concept would have had it seemingly more so set in the 1930s, early Indiana Jones era with the tent, tools, and truck here, instead of actually taking place in ancient Egypt, as Penny states that we are about 4,000 years in the past. Though I guess we do see the explorer zombies there, I don't know. And in this dig site sketch, we can see some scaffolding, ladders, an Anubis statue, as well as a broken one, both of which appear to be placed on the feet of a sphinx. There's also a pair of sketches where we can see the stage looks obviously much closer to how it's seen in the final cut. Though here we can also see a scrapped idea for what I'm assuming is a time portal that I guess the zombies would have come in through. Then, although there are also concept sketches of Pirate Seas, Wild West, Dark Ages, and Jurassic Marsh, which apparently was once named Dino World, that look very similar to their final design, there's also this sketch that appears to be an early version of Frostbite Caves, where here the cave is much less interesting looking, and the right side here is completely missing the giant frozen face that's, well, certainly there in the final version. And like I mentioned earlier, there's also some conceptual designs for levels that never made it into the game. For one, there's this barn area, where we have this what looks to be an earlier design, and then this one that looks much more polished. Additionally, there's also this related sketch, which reveals plans for planting the plants on a flatbed trailer in this level that would have apparently been towed by a truck. A pretty cool and ambitious sounding idea. There are also several zombie designs meant for this area too, so it looks like there was a bigger emphasis on developing this map, at least compared to some of the other scrapped ideas. And speaking of those other scrapped ideas, there are also conceptual sketches for a football field stage, as well as an area seemingly set in France, as we can see the Eiffel Tower in the background, and more importantly, birds eating a baguette here. Now, early looks at the levels are cool and all, but what I'm sure most of you are more interested in are the titular plants and zombies themselves, and there's an absolute truckload of early conceptual sketches for those too. In addition to early sketches of zombies that are seen in the final cut of the game, like this set for the regular zombie where it appears a lot more expressive than they're normally seen, or this set with Yeti, Disco, and the All-Star zombies, where the All-Star one can be seen holding either a lawn gnome or a flamingo. There are also numerous alternate designs or zombie types that just straight up never made it into the game. There's an idea for what looks like a new and improved version of the Digger zombie that could move around but could also change directions unlike the version in the previous game, as well as a scrapped casket full of clown zombies that, as seen in this diagram, would apparently emerge from their casket each in a different direction. Then, although we do see unique area-specific designs for the zombies, depending on which level you're playing on in this game, this sketch here appears to reveal different ideas for the cone and bucket head zombies for a few of the levels. For this prehistoric one, which I guess could go for either Jurassic Marsh or Frostbite Caves, the cone and bucket would straight up just be made of wood and stone respectively. Ancient Egypt cone is seen here with a more pharaoh-like design, and the bucket had a completely different bird design in this sketch. And then the pirate cone would look much more like a pirate hat, and the bucket would turn into a keg of the good stuff. Now I think all of these designs are way more unique than the ones that ended up being used in the game, especially the pirate ones, as I think these are way more interesting than just a simple wooden bucket and a cone with a crossboned band. And of course, you probably noticed by now that I didn't mention the Viking designs here, and well, that's cause there aren't really any Viking zombies ever seen in this game. There's also not really a Viking-themed level in this game, I guess, so either this could hint at another level that was scrapped, or I guess maybe they could have fit in the Frostbite Caves level. And actually, as it turns out, there is a Viking-themed level in the China-exclusive game Plants vs. Zombies All-Stars, where a Viking level pretty similar to Frostbite Caves exists, but the cone and bucket head designs are still different. And since these Viking designs are lumped in with the rest here, it's possible that this level might have been planned to appear in Plants vs. Zombies 2 as well. Anyways, now going in the order of stages as they appear in the game, we got an early concept sketch of the mummy zombie, an even earlier one where it's seen in a quite different art style, alternate designs of the regular and buckethead mummy zombies where they're seen wearing a brown vest. There's a scrapped worker zombie idea that's similar to the barrel rolling and troglodyte zombies, would see it pushing a large block that could have apparently crushed a plant instantly, and this idea was apparently reworked into the explorer zombies, which basically have the same insta-plant killing effect. Then we got some more scrapped mummy zombie ideas, including one of them wielding a sword, being all wrapped up, having a snake wrapped around their legs. There's a scrapped magic carpet riding zombie concept. This pair of scrap designs that's believed to be early male and female versions of the Pharaoh zombie. And then finally, there's this super weird one that appears to be some sort of strange crossover between the Ancient Egypt zombie and the Neon Mixtape Tour. Then for the Pirate Seas level, we got a whole bunch of alternate designs. There's a much more unique looking pirate zombie design, a much more unique design for the Buckethead pirate variant where it would sport an old diving helmet. There's an early pirate captain sketch that would look quite different with different clothing and a different looking hat, would be missing an arm, and the parrot also appears quite different here too. There's a much different shirtless purple panted conceptual design for the swashbuckler zombie, the seagull zombie not all tied up as it's seen in the game, as well as it actually walking on the ground. And then there's also this set of sketches that reveals quite a few more scrapped designs, including one looking through a telescope, one walking the plank, one sleeping in a hammock, a zombie that got backstabbed, a zombie having an allergic reaction to eating sea urchins, and more. Now next are some early designs for some of the Wild West zombies, where namely the regular cowboy and the poncho zombies sport some different designs. There's an unused prehistoric zombie that could have been for either Frostbite Caves or Jurassic Marsh. Then we got what looks like an early version of the Hunter zombie, and also scrapped zombie designs for both a Viking zombie as well as a hippie one. Then additionally for Frostbite Caves, there are early and alternate designs of the dodo bird, as well as a bunch of alternate cave zombie designs, including one holding a club, a design of the troglodyte with a moose skull hat, and then there's also what looks to be a design for the Hunter zombie where it can be seen holding a hatchet. Furthermore, there's also this set of sketches for a scrapped zombie type where two Yeti imp fellas would be seen sledding on a zombie, and then if they crashed into a walnut or another obstacle, they would flip over 2 spaces and then start their march towards the next plant in their path. Although different, this is sort of similar to the Sloth Gargantuar, which does throw Yeti imps when taking damage, so perhaps this sledding trio was reworked into that. Then, for far future, there's not only a scrap design for the Mecha Football Zombie, where it can be seen with longer legs, as well as commandeered by 2 zombies instead of 1, similar to the Discotron 3000, but there are also quite a few conceptual designs for the Zombot Tomorrowtron. These include several with a bigger focus on using some mech hands, a flying ship, a longer multi-legged walker, as well as this larger mech that would seemingly only have 1 robot hand at the front. Interestingly, with all of these, Dr. Zomboss appears to have a much more alien-like design with a bigger and often longer cranium. And outside of these ones, there aren't really many other concept sketches for Dr. Zomboss, so based on these ones, especially this one, I'd like to speculate that maybe there was a plan for the Doctor's physical design to also change between the different areas the game takes you through, instead of just disguises and different mechs and such. Then moving on to the Dark Ages level, we got a scrap design for the Peasant Zombie in a range of color schemes. There's a handful of scrapped Wizard Zombie designs, most of which look more interesting than the generic looking ones seen in the final game. And we can also see this scrapped Imp Wizard Zombie riding a sheep. There are scrap designs for a Thief Zombie, including like a Robin Hood looking one, and this Barbarian one wearing a helmet. There's a scrapped Soldier design, a scrapped Imp hiding in a barrel, various sketches of a Blacksmith Zombie that never made it into the game, a much more interesting Knight Zombie concept where instead of just a basic design with a knight helmet, the zombie would either have much more armor or be hidden under a really cool suit of armor with a big shield at the front and would have an imp with some dynamite at the helm. And then here we also have several other designs for the shield, helmet, and like we saw earlier, there's also another weird crossover zombie here where it looks like a cross between the Knight Zombie as well as a Mummy Zombie. For the Neon Mixtape Tour, we again have a whole bunch of unused zombie designs, such as some 80s themed workout zombies, including the sweatband-clad Gargantuar, several alternate designs for MC Zombie, as well as the breakdancer zombies, the glitter zombie in a different dress, an alternate design for the hair metal Gargantuar, as well as some different mohawk hairstyles for the punk zombie. Then for Jurassic Marsh, we got a different looking basic Jurassic zombie, a club-wielding one with a saber-toothed tiger costume that looks quite similar to the Hunter zombie from Frostbite Cave. There's a scrapped cave woman zombie design, early sketches for the cone and bucket heads, another look at some zombies that would push a block that would seemingly also block direct projectile attacks, and similarly there's this scrapped zombie that would push around a square wheel. I guess nobody ever said that these zombies were smart. And then finally here, there's this zombie type that went unused in this stage, where it would be seen holding a burning torch similar to the Explorer zombies. And I know we're talking about the zombies in this section, but there are also various concept sketches for the dinosaurs seen in the Jurassic Marsh, and here we can see some slightly alternate designs, colors, as well as this early set of sketches for the T-Rex outlining how it would function in the game. Then for Big Wave Beach, there's this one set of unused concept sketches that reveal a few scrapped designs for the Bikini Zombie, where they had different hairstyles, makeup, as well as different outfits. Then, in addition to a scrapped idea for a Greaser Imp, there's also these different shirts and hairstyles for the Pompadour Zombie as well. And then lastly, like I mentioned earlier in this video, there are quite a few zombie designs meant for the scrapped farm level that were ultimately never implemented. These include a regular farmer one with a boot on its head, which I guess was supposed to be the Conehead variant, the Buckethead version for this area, ladder zombies similar to how they're seen in the first game, I guess. There are several designs of zombies and imps holding a pitchfork or a cultivator and a little piggy here. There's a scrapped tractor zombie with also scrapped tractor design, some of which look like they could have been a boss of their own or more likely driven by Dr. Zomboss. And then there's also this zombie type that would have carried a scarecrow, and this one was also later apparently planned to have been used in the Wild West level. And I guess maybe that's why this farm level was scrapped, as either it did get reworked into the Wild West level, or it was deemed that they were just too similar. And this idea is only reinforced by the fact that we can see the zombies seen in the Wild West level mixed in with this page here that features the farm layout as well as several of the zombies intended for the farm level. Whew, okay, and that's basically it for the zombies, so now let's finally switch gears and talk about the other half of this game's title, various alternate and scrap designs and concepts for the plants. It's pretty crazy to think that with 188 plants in the game, there are still some designs and ideas that haven't been implemented over the years. Anyways, in the interest of time, I'll try to go through most of the more notable changes seen in these designs. So for starters here, we have a scrapped mammoth walnut, as well as an unused spearmint plant that, well, is a spearmint that has a mint spear. Yeah, you get it. Now, although there is a spearmint plant in the game, a whole family of mint plants actually, it looks nothing like this, and is much less menacing looking than this scrap design with its crazed warface. And then the mammoth walnut here, I guess, could have been for the Frostbite Caves level, or an early version of the primal walnut that's seen in Jurassic Marsh. Next, there's a scrapped pineapple that's sketched as either jumping and slamming down, firing off slices of itself, or shooping to whoop. There's this unused emergency carrot that was likely reworked into the intensive carrot, who, although looks less unique, still has a healing ability. And there are also several early designs for the intensive carrots to boot. Then we got what looks like early designs for the iceberg lettuce, dartichoke, and beet that would seemingly deal with a different type of beating. There's a pair of unused cacti that would likely use their beefy arms to punch up some zombies. And although this idea was seemingly reworked into the bok choy, the cactus from the first game was eventually added to the game. There's this sketch of an unused flying plant that appears very similar to the loquat plant seen only in the Chinese version of Plants vs. Zombies 2. Then we have several concept sketches of what looks to be what became the escape route, and we can also see this image of a dead tree here, I guess used as a reference image to get the design all nice and twisted looking. Then we got not one, but two unused early designs for the Snapdragon, one angrier looking one, and one more relaxed, like he's here to just have a good time. And speaking of having a good time, this early design of the spring bean sure looks to be having one, as its facial expression is almost creepy looking. Then we have early designs for the laser bean, an unused radish, this flower which I think could be an early version of the Grimrose, some, I don't know, daikon radishes or something, some sort of high-tech bush, whatever this veggie is. There's an early sketch of the sunbean, as well as an unused sun sprout plant that was seemingly planned to eat up oncoming zombies, and by undergoing the process of zombosynthesis, would turn them into collectible sun. And I guess this was replaced with the toadstool, as it pretty much does the same thing. There are some early designs for the homing thistle, a few for the ghost pepper, where we can see several early designs for both its idle state as well as its exploding scream, which all look much less frightening than how it's ultimately seen in the game. Then there are what I think are early designs for the lava guava, where it could also be seen holding some popcorn. There are some early designs for the celery stalker, where it appears as a single unit and would apparently act similar to the other scrapped punching plants we've already seen. This set of sketches reveals another scrapped plant idea for a palm tree that would apparently roll coconuts like a bowling ball towards oncoming zombies. There's a set of early sketches for the charred guard and outlining how it would fling zombies away. Then another scrapped plant idea is this bamboo plant that was planned to first be seen in Big Wave Beach. We got several early sketches of the rutabaga, including some mock-ups of how it would look in the game, some alternate colors and early designs for the stunyon, including a sketch of it having a much gnarlier burp than how it's seen in the game. There's a scrap design of the red stinger, where its face would have been on its stem instead of the flower, and here we can also see some early concepts for its regular and plant food boosted beam attack. There's an early design of the gold leaf, and some early designs for what I think is the beet again. Sorry, I'm not an expert in veggies. Okay, don't worry, we're almost through them all. Next up, we got an early, more simple design for the toadstool, where here its chomp was seen much bigger. We got an unused concept design for the time warp plant, where frankly, I preferred this design way over the one that was ultimately chosen. There are some early sketches for the jack-o'-lantern, including one where its flames were orange instead of green, sketches of a cyborg walnut, early sketches of the dusklobber, some of which look quite different, a vine-looking fella that might have been a precursor to the wasabi whip, as they seem to have a similar attack, and many, many, many more. Then next up here, there are several early sketches of the primal plants seen in the game. Some of these, like for the primal pea shooters or sunflowers, look fairly similar to how they're seen in the game, just often less furry looking with the sunflower, I guess. But there are also some early sketches for the primal potato mine, and last but not least are quite a few scrap designs for the primal walnut. There's a bunch of stuff here, including various degrees of spikes, looking like a triceratops, a more fuzzy version, I guess to better match the pea shooter and sunflowers, this one here, and then straight up just being a slab. Nice. Next, there are also a few sketches that reveal numerous costume ideas for the plants, most of which I believe never went on to be used. So first we have this sheet for the pea shooter, and here we got it all, from a vampire, a clown, spider, having a beard, a ghost, having antenna, a Frankenstein, one not good for people with trypophobia, to even Jason and Terminator inspired costumes, and also straight up just wearing a paper bag. Then another sheet featuring some Halloween costume designs is surprisingly for the bok choy, and here we see some more ideas including a superhero getup, a human face mask, which is honestly kinda creepy, a mummy, and more. Honestly, these costume ideas are really cool, and although we did get some in the game, most of them aren't as interesting as these. And then lastly for the plants, this concept sketch here reveals that totally not Tabasco hot sauce was originally going to act as the buff that boosts plants in the game. And of course this got reworked into the game's plant food, and the hot sauce just became a simple plot device as a topping for Crazy Dave's taco that kicks off the game's story. Now I showed off most of the more interesting early sketches here, but not all of them, like this cool set showing off some pretty slick looking design concepts for the sunflower. But if you would like to check out all of the documented concept sketches, I'll have the fandom page where you can peep them linked down in the description below. Now lastly for this section, although not technically a plant, there are also a few concept sketches that reveal that there were at least some plans for the flower pots to appear in this game too. And similar to the rooftop level from the first game, they would have been required to plant plants in areas without soil or sand. And here we can also of course see that the idea of them appearing in different qualities was tossed around too, from a crappy pot to a regular one to a gold or perma pot all the way to a hover pot. And as we can read here, they were planned to be purchasable upgrades for the plants. And now lastly for this video, since we're already talking about early designs and such, there are also a few early versions of graphics that were seen in pre-release builds of the game. For example, in this screenshot, we can see early UI graphics for the seed packets, the power-ups, as well as the plant food bar on the bottom here. And speaking of which, the plant food graphic was also seen a bit different in these pre-release builds too. And then more interestingly, a few bits of concept art for the gameplay appear to reveal some more scrapped graphic designs, as well as even some cut mechanics and more. The UI graphics in this mockup look quite different once again. There are some more UI design ideas, including these touch me buttons here. There's a mockup of a stage completion screen, and then finally there's this mockup of a power-up menu where we can see a tactical cuke power-up that could be purchased. And as of the making of this video, no power-up of this name or look was ever added to the game. Well, at least this game, as a tactical cuke power-up was added to future games in the series, including the Chinese version of Plants vs. Zombies 2, where when called in, it can basically wipe out every zombie on screen. Talk about cucular warfare. So what better way to start off this video than by first taking a look at some unused plants and plant mechanics that at one point or another were left over unused in the game. First up, we have a scrapped plant known as the pulse shroom. Now unfortunately, as we'll see, a bunch of these unused plants don't have any finished graphics that were implemented for them, but even so, thankfully they also had leftover almanac entries that give us a better idea of how they were intended to function, well, at least some of them. And also, as we'll be seeing in this footage recorded by Play Games Go for these unused plants, interestingly, they all seem to default to just a graphic of the sun drops. So anyways, the Pulse Shroom name basically gives it away by itself on what it was going to be, a Shroom class unit that would be able to catapult projectiles over objects. And being a Shroom, it was obviously mostly intended for nighttime areas like the Dark Ages level. Furthermore, the leftover almanac entry also reveals that the special gimmick of the Pulse Shroom here was that it would actually get stronger over time. And leftover coding reveals that these upgrades would have it fling more projectiles, and apparently it would also have been able to be upgraded 2 times, with each upgrade taking 2 minutes to complete. Next up, we have the Scaredy Shroom from the original Plants vs. Zombies, and although this shroom was eventually added in the version 10.6.1 update to the game, there was originally an unused version of it left over in some much earlier updates, and although its main function remained the same, its plant food upgrade was actually different. Instead of the ability to rally surrounding Scaredy Shrooms to do a group blast that can push back zombies, originally the plan was for the single boosted shroom to blast out 60 spores straight forward. Then also staying on the shroom train here, next up there's a dart shroom that was scrapped, and although it doesn't have a proper almanac entry, its leftover coding suggests that it would only allow the user to plant it in the first 5 columns of the stage, and giving it plant food would lob out 40 darts 4 tiles forward and they would gently fall down, which honestly looks really satisfying. Next, we have the Roto Shroom, whose gimmick was that you could actually choose one of 8 directions you'd want it to shoot. And its plant food upgrade would have it shooting out 60 of its projectiles, and you could move around where you want to aim. Then there's a scrapped Vacuum Shroom, which had the ability to suck up any zombies in their surrounding tiles and place them in front of them, and their plant food upgrade would also give them a boosted shield. And although nerfed, this ability seems to have been reworked into the game's sweet potato. Then next up, there's the Zoom Shroom, which would have caused any zombie that touched it to be yeeted all the way back to the right side of the screen, and its plant food buff would do the same, but this time it would cause all zombies that are on the ground to get pushed back to the start. Now, unlike the previous rooms, the next pair actually default to some different sun graphics. The Evil Shroom Speed is seen as a dark blue sun, while the scrapped Evil Shroom Toughness appears as a red one. Anyways, both of these shrooms don't actually help the player in defending their lawn at all, and will in fact hinder the player. When eaten by a zombie, the Evil Shroom Toughness would boost that zombie's toughness or resistance to damage. And similarly, no surprise here, the Evil Shroom Speed would increase the speed of the zombie that consumed it. Now, based on their effects and how they don't actually help the player, it's very likely that these actually weren't meant to be plants at all, but rather a way for the developers to test the orange and purple potions seen in the game's Dark Alchemy stages, where they give the zombies the same buffs when consumed. Next up, there's a Sun Gun plant that was scrapped. It ends up briefly defaulting to using the Magnet Shroom's graphics, and its ability would have seen it attract sun before then eventually blasting it towards the zombies in a variety of directions. It's kinda unsurprising why this got cut, as I don't know why you'd want to trade valuable sun for a rather mediocre attack. Next is the Icy Current, which is unused in the international version of this game, but it was eventually added in the China exclusive version, where it basically just functions like an ice version of the Electric Current. Then a Braaaains plant that defaults to using iceberg lettuce graphics would have, similar to the Zoom Shroom, yeeted a zombie that would have come into contact with it, but the difference here being that the zombie would then start to flash before exploding, killing it instantly. Now, Braaaains could only do this once before disappearing, but its plant food buff would actually increase its ability to do its magic 3 times. Then next up, there's a Sun Pod that was scrapped that fittingly here defaults to using the Peapod's graphics, and its ability would have had it growing an extra head for every 500 sun that the player has saved up. So yeah, I guess if you wanted to hoard a whole bunch of sun, this would have been great for you. And then the plant food effect for these fellas would have worked pretty much the same as for the Peapods, as it would have also just shot out 5 giant peas. Then next we got Aqua Booster, which despite the name, oddly defaults to not only using Potato Mine's graphics, but also its functionality. Now this obviously wasn't its intended purpose, and based on it having the same internal ID as the Moonflower, it's believed that its aqua boosting idea was reworked into Moonflower's ability to power up adjacent shadow plants. Then next, we got a scrapped mini pea shooter that would look and function like a regular pea shooter, but would have cost a lot less at only 25 sun, but this would be at the cost of also dealing less damage to zombies. And it also would have had a pretty cool plant food buff where all of the mini pea shooters in play would multiply to the right. And with this, you could have basically instantly filled your lawn with these weaker pea shooters, which I think seems pretty busted. Now next up, I briefly discussed these next 2 scrapped plants in my previous video, as we also saw some concept art for them, but now let's chat about the Bamboom plant as well as the Coconut Bowler. For Bamboom, although the concept art gave us a glimpse into what it was conceptualized to look like, here the plant defaults back to just appearing as sun. Now apparently the Bamboom was intended to have appeared for the game's Big Wave Beach level, and when charged up, it would have fired off a projectile that would deal crazy damage, enough to one-shot a Gargantuar, and it would have also dealt splash damage covering a 3x3 grid around where it landed. And if that wasn't powerful enough, its plant food buff would also have it launch 3 of these shots on 3 random tiles, and with the splash damage, this could effectively blast most of the lawn. Now, if the Bamboom's moves sound familiar, it's probably because it appears like it was reworked into the Banana Launcher, who also first appears in Big Wave Beach and also launches explosive projectiles like this. And interestingly, the Bamboom seems to have had a bit more functionality for it left over in the game, as unlike some of the other unused plants we've went over, here the sun graphic would actually change depending on what state the Bamboom was in. The graphic would turn red when in the act of firing, green when recharging, and then a more solid yellow when selected, and then back to normal when it would be ready to fire again. And then, as far as the coconut bowler goes, similarly, we had a glimpse into what it was planned to look like, but here it actually ends up defaulting to an X tile. And once again, similarly to Bamboom, this time it appears that the coconut bowler was reworked and split into the bowling bulbs as well as the coconut cannon. And similar again to the bowling bulbs, the plant food buff for the coconut bowler would have also had it launching out 3 exploding shots. What's also interesting is that these placeholder graphics for the coconut bowler also show how many regular or plant food projectiles it has, or any permutation of both. It's a pretty simple but kinda cool way of visualizing the ammo storage in this placeholder state. Then next up for the unused plants here, we have a sprout. Now sprouts are seen in Plants vs. Zombies 2 as a collectible that can then be used in the Zen Garden, but there were also apparently plans for it to be an in-game plant too. But this wasn't planned to be a regular plant that you could unlock and keep, but rather one that would be more so a stage gimmick in an also scrapped minigame where apparently the plan was for the player to plant 5 of these sprouts around the lawn before selecting their seed packets. And then this would basically turn into a game of chance, as each of the sprouts planted had a chance of growing into a different plant depending on where it was planted. With the leftmost column starting at 1, planting the sprouts in an odd column would then have a 50-50 split chance of it growing into either a pea shooter or a sunflower, and then planting them on an even number, it would have either a 75% chance of growing into a walnut, or a 1 in 4 chance of growing into a tall nut instead. Honestly, I think it seems like this idea would have made for a pretty cool minigame. And then lastly, although the marigold plants are seen in Plants vs. Zombies 2 in the Zen Garden, there's coding for them that suggests that they were originally planned to be a plantable plant like they were in the first game. In fact, the marigolds could be hacked back into the game where they would produce silver coins, and also had a plant food effect where they would produce a bunch of silver coins at once before then disappearing. And apparently, the developers scrapped the marigolds like this since it was deemed that they could be used to farm coins too easily, as if that were a bad thing. To add to this, there are actually quite a few alternate costumes that were meant for the marigolds too. Now most of them just have their petals in different colors, including red, green, blue, yellow, orange, purple, dark purple, and then there's also one where it would wear a top hat. And speaking of unused costumes, there are actually a few more of them for plants that were either scrapped, altered, or repurposed. These include the pea pods wearing some blue marching band hats, the pepperbolt with some long brown hair as well as a backwards cap. This sun hat was apparently once intended for the pea shooter, but ultimately it looks like it was just repurposed for the repeater. And then finally, there's this scrapped costume again for the pepperbolt, where it could be seen wearing a Hachimaki headband. Its design appears to have featured the Japanese rising sun flag, which although is still in use today by the Japanese self-defense forces, many people outside of Japan see this flag as controversial, so it's not too surprising that this change was made. And now lastly for the plant side of things, although currently unused as of the making of this video, data has been found in the game for a few more plants that strongly suggest that they may be added to the game at some point in the future. So first up is a sea shroom, and unfortunately, so far, only the seed packet graphic for it has been found. So although we don't quite yet know what its abilities will be, at least we can see what it'll look like. And the same can be said for the currently unused electric peel plant that also only has a seed packet graphic for it. Thankfully enough though, for the last plant here, the Dragon Brute, we actually got some more info. The Dragon Brute will apparently be part of the Concealment family of plants and will be able to lob 3 projectiles down 3 lanes. Its Shadow Aura buff will make its projectiles poisonous, its Plant Food buff will launch projectiles at every zombie, and when the Dragon Brute is defeated by a zombie, instead of just disappearing, it will actually split into 3 smaller plants. Just based on how much info there is for these fellas, I reckon we'll probably be seeing these added in first. Now next, as a quick aside here, before we move on to talking about the zombies, There's unused text references that appears to show that there were at least some plans for Plants vs. Zombies 2 to get an official PC release at some point. This text includes mentioning that the user's graphics card doesn't meet the game's requirements, mentioning that hardware acceleration can't be enabled, references to running the game in windowed and full screen mode, and more. Now, it's been well over 10 years at this point since the game first came out, so if we haven't gotten a PC release by now, we probably never will. But it's really too bad for people like me that don't play phone games very often, so we have to resort to other methods to emulate this game on PC. Then, also in the text department, there's reference in the game's code to a scrapped ability for the player to actually name Penny, Crazy Dave's RV, as there is RV name invalid, where the response would be, I didn't quite get that. And then if the user were to name the RV the same name as the player name, the response would be, that's your name, silly. I guess it was deemed a better idea to just name the RV Penny instead of letting the player decide for themselves. And now, finally getting to the zombies half of the game. Just like the plants, there are quite a few zombie concepts that, as of yet, haven't been implemented. Some of these zombies have leftover graphics, descriptions, or coding, but usually not all three. So for starters, there's a scrapped deflector zombie, which was apparently supposed to be a veteran version of the shield zombie. Leftover text for it reveals that it would also have a shield that would regenerate over time. There's a leftover full description, as well as a shorter one that reveals that its shield would actually stretch across all 5 rows. Also for far future, there was a veteran robo-cone zombie that basically would have just been a faster and stronger version of the cone zombie. There was a pet zombie that was scrapped, and although there aren't any proper graphics for it, it can apparently be somewhat re-implemented into the game, where it will appear like a regular zombie but will walk even slower. Now, we did see the scrapped zombie dog in my previous videos on the first game, so could this zombie pet have been related to that? Maybe, but unfortunately, at least for now, we don't really get to see much else about it. Next, we saw a few bits of concept art for some zombies meant for the Dark Ages stages in my previous video. And to confirm that they were actually intended to have been implemented, there are references to the scrapped thief zombies who would have apparently instantly stolen the rightmost plant in a given row. Then, in addition to the bucket imp sketch we saw, there's also reference to a conehead imp, as well as one wearing a crown. There's references to another night zombie which could deflect all straight shot projectiles and could only be damaged by lobbed attacks, and this was likely this scrap design that we went over previously. And we also saw sketches for a scrapped blacksmith zombie, and apparently this zombie had the ability to craft helmets for the regular peasant zombies to buff them. And this is very similar to how the Zombie King works, so it's very likely that the blacksmith was reworked into the king. Then also for Dark Ages, man, there sure are a lot of scrapped zombies for this stage. We got scrapped alternate wizard zombies that would shoot out projectiles at plants that would turn them into sheep instead of just casting a zapping spell to do so. Barrel zombies were scrapped, and they would have basically been this stage's version of the sarcophagus zombies, as they would move slowly until their barrel was broken. There are unused veteran versions of both the peasant flag-carrying zombie as well as the wizard zombie, both of which were apparently meant to be implemented in an unreleased expansion for the Dark Ages stage. There were plans for a grave dropper class of zombie that appears to have been reworked into the surfer zombie, as it would have carried a gravestone and then smashed it onto the first plant that it reached. And then finally for Dark Ages here, also once planned to have been added in the previously mentioned scrapped expansion, there's a castlehead zombie that was meant to have been this stage's version of the brickhead zombie. Next, there were also a few zombies that were planned to be added in an expansion for Frostbite Caves, and once again, not only were these zombies never added, but the expansion never came to be. And these zombies include another brickhead zombie variant for this stage where it would have been seen donning the skull of a woolly mammoth or something. And then there were some more scrapped veteran zombies, this time versions of the Weasel Hoarder, the Hunter zombies, as well as the Troglobites. Then yet another expansion that was scrapped would have been for the modern day stage, and here veteran versions of the All-Star zombies and Super Imp fans were to have been added. And then to top all of that off, there were also apparently supposed to be veteran versions of the Zomboss fights in Big Wave Beach, Dark Ages, Lost City, Neon Mixtape Tour, as well as Frostbite Caves. Then also for Big Wave Beach, there's reference to a fast swimmer zombie that would have, as the name suggests, swam faster in the water but then revert back to normal speed on land, and this too seems to have been reworked into the Surfer Zombie. Then Lost City was planned to have Totem Dropper Zombies, which would have carried totems, and after 3 were piled up, an Explorer Zombie would be summoned. And then finally, there were also Cleopatra Zombies, which were meant to have appeared in the Ancient Egypt stage, but were ultimately scrapped. And these Cleopatra Zombies would have functioned pretty much like the Dancing Zombies, as after doing a dance, the Cleopatra Zombie would call up to 4 zombies, but this time, in addition to them surrounding her in a diamond formation, she would have had the ability for a few more, such as having a wall of 3 in front, 1 in front and 1 behind, just 1 in front, as well as a box pattern. What I find extra interesting is that this Cleopatra Zombie would have functioned similarly to the scrapped Michael Jackson Zombie that I covered in my videos on the first game. Is it a coincidence that 2 of the zombies with similar effects were scrapped or altered? Probably, but I think it's pretty funny nonetheless. Now last up for this video, in addition to the zombie types that were cut, there were also a few other zombie-related things that were either scrapped or altered. For example, there are actually several unused almanac entries for the zombies seen in Big Wave Beach, and some of these appear to reveal early names for them. The Pompadour Zombies would have just been known as Beach Zombies, the Bikini Zombies were originally known as Beach Bunny Zombies, and then the Octo Zombies were the less concise Octopus Thrower Zombies. Another interesting almanac thing that was scrapped was that originally, before they were consolidated into one entry, there were actually unique descriptions for the Camel Zombie lead depending on how many humps the group would have, a single hump, double hump, or more. And a similar thing can also be seen for the Roman Shield Zombies, where there are scrapped almanac entries for a duo Roman Shield pair, as well as the Triad. Then, although normally the Pirate Barrel Zombie is just lumped in with the Barrel Roller Zombie, there's also an unused standalone almanac entry meant for them too. Then, although lacking full descriptions or anything, there are unused almanac icons for a bunch of the zombie types that were seen in the Lunar Zoo Year timed event, the Zombie Dove, as well as the Zombie Monkey, suggesting that all of these were going to have their own almanac entries here too. Well, the Lunar Zoo Year ones did have entries in the Chinese version of the game, but not the international one. Finally, for the almanac stuff, there are also early descriptions for a bunch of the Lost City zombies too. Now, I won't go deeper into all of them here, but as you can see, most of the descriptions are quite different and often, at least I find, better than the ones that went on to be used in the final version. And what's extra interesting is that we can see that the Buckethead Adventurer Zombie was originally referenced as a Kettlehead Zombie, and Parasol Zombie is referred to as Jane in the file names, likely a reference to Jane from Tarzan. And lastly, we went over some unused costumes for the plants earlier, but there were also a few meant for the zombies that went unused as well. For the Spring Inning event, instead of just the differently colored poncho, there were some plans for the Poncho Zombie to also wear a special Easter egg themed grate. And then there's also an unused costume for the Treasure Yeti, where much like how it appears in other stages wearing a different costume, it would have appeared in the Wild West stages donning an epic cowboy hat. Then finally, although I guess not really an unused costume, but before it was changed back to just a brain flag to match the rest of the levels, the Flag Zombies and Neon Mixtape Tour were originally planned to carry a ZTV flag, which appears to be a reference to MTV. Perhaps this change was made to avoid any sort of legal troubles, similar to how the Zomboni Zombie description was changed in the first game. Alright, so starting things off with the plant side of things here, there's quite a bit more to chat about for them. First up, there's actually an animation for the spikeweeds that never ended up getting used, and it's of them coming up from the ground and then basically turning into a buzzsaw as they quickly start spinning. Now, based on this being quite a bit different than how the spikeweeds normally function, it's likely that this is a leftover from a scrapped plant food ability where they would spin their way across a lawn towards a row of zombies. Next up, there's also an unused animation for the imitators, where they would take their hats off and smile, and this was apparently meant to be used for them when they would get watered in the Zen Garden. Next, we got some early placeholder graphics of the Fire Pea Shooter lacking its signature burning head, and essentially appearing as just more of a recolor of the regular Pea Shooter. And with this early design, there are also various graphics of it rocking the regular Pea Shooter's costume, several identical Pea Shooter animations including an idle one, getting watered, attacking, and the plant food firing animation, as well as a seed packet graphic. And speaking of seed packets, there's also this unused graphic of the AKEEs meant for their seed packets where they're seen loaded with their seed bullets, unlike the graphic that is used where they're missing there. Now, in my previous videos, I've covered some plants which, at the time, weren't added to the game yet, the sea shrooms, dragon brutes, as well as the electric peel. Now, unsurprisingly, all three of those, as well as several other plants, have been added to the game since I made those videos. But there's graphics and data found for some more plants that are currently unused, but just like the others, chances are quite high that all of these will eventually get added as well. These include a lemonade plant that will heal other plants in their rows and will also offer a chance of activating their plant food effect, a rose plant which can reflect wizard zombie spells back at them and unleash a woolly whirlwind to turn zombies into sheep, and most interesting of these, I think, is the brainstem plant, which in addition to having a pretty rad design, rocks the ability of attracting zombies into its lane before then shrinking them down. And apparently, these would also offer some sort of rescue mechanism for the player if a zombie would reach the left side of the lawn. And yeah, these animations for it look pretty slick. Then, in addition to those three, graphics have also been found for a Volt Snapdragon, Blazing Knight, and Sakura plants, though unlike the others, there currently isn't any other data for these besides their seed packet images. Once again, like we saw with the plants that were unused at the time of my previous videos, I'd be surprised if these don't get added to the game in the coming months. In fact, I just saw this when launching the game this week, so it looks like the brainstem is basically already here. Now next, in much earlier versions of this game, there were placeholder graphics for both the Puff and Sun Shrooms where they could be seen taking on their original PvZ-1 designs. And not only were there still images, but even animations too. For the Puff Shroom, there was an idle, attacking, and plant food animation, though they're all basically the same animation of them just growing and shrinking. But then on the other hand, the Sun Shroom has some more interesting animations in addition to just their idle ones, including them producing sun, a much more intense plant food animation, as well as this rather rough animation of the Sun Shroom doing a flip, meant for it producing sun while in its smaller form. Yeah, that's a pretty rad flip if I do say so myself. And interestingly, there are also some unused animations for the Sun Shroom in its final design that is seen in this game for the plant food animations in their smallest and medium-sized stages of growth. Now in the game, giving the Sun Shroom plant food will instantly grow it to its largest size before it then produces a bunch of sun, thus leaving these plant food animations for the smaller sizes unnecessary. And now, moving on to the zombies side of the fence here, we got several more bits of cut content to go over in addition to the rest we've already covered in my previous videos. For starters, there are a bunch of zombie animations that go unused, the first of which is this animation for the seagull zombies, where we can see their ropes falling after they get destroyed, suggesting that the zombies they hold could have been dropped and then started walking after falling to the ground. Next, there's an unused animation for the jetpack zombies, where instead of stopping when coming into contact with a plant before then hovering over it, this unused animation suggests that the zombies wouldn't slow down and would immediately hover jump over it instead, and if that's the case, I can only assume this was changed to make these fellas less difficult to deal with. Then there's this seemingly very early unused animation of the pianist zombie playing on its red rectangle and then dying of cringe. There are a few unused animations for the shield zombie for it powering on its shield, which causes the visor to become purple, moving with the shield powered up with the purple visor, and then an animation of the shield seemingly getting deactivated. And although these never ended up getting used in PvZ2 here, these apparently did get used in PvZ Online. Then for the Zombot Tomorrowtron, although these red squares and green X eye animations were seen in the game up until the version 2.4 update where they were removed, there are also some additional eye animations that never made the cut, and with the removal of the other two several years ago now, I don't think they ever will. Now, these include an animation of the eye turning into a cyan plus, a magenta circle, as well as an orange triangle, which is kinda odd, as the triangle tiles in Far Future are more yellow than orange, but I suppose the Tomorrowtron's eye is already yellow, so this was probably changed to make it appear at least slightly different. Next, there's actually an early version of the Bugbot Imp where the mechanized walker looks far less detailed than the final design, notably lacking stuff like the side panel and the chompy mouth at the front. Also interestingly, before being changed to Bugbot Imp, the original name for this fella was actually the Spiderbot Imp instead. For this fella in this early design, equally early unused animations include it landing and opening up from its ball form, an idle and death animation, and then rather funny looking are these walking and eating animations where the mech kinda just hops around. And while on the topic of placeholder zombie graphics, next there's actually a placeholder design for the peasant zombies from the Dark Ages stages, where oddly they're just seen as the basic Far Future ones but with a blue jacket instead of a red one. And then even more strange is that the flag variant is seen holding the flag from Pirate Seas. Needless to say, these placeholder fellas underwent a massive rework for their final design. Next, we got a pair of unused animations for the zombie weasels seen in Frostbite Caves, transitioning to and from their eating animations. There's an unused animation of the Relic Hunter zombies failing to land that appears to be a leftover from the Swashbuckler zombie, as the Relic Hunter zombie reuses many of the Swashbuckler's animations. And then the Excavator zombie has an unused animation of it losing its shovel and dropping its hands. Next, there appears to be a veteran version of the Zombie King that was cut from the game, alongside the Dark Ages expansion that as of yet hasn't come to be. The design seen in this image shows this variant appearing generally the same as the regular version of it that is used, but here it can be seen raising a chalice instead of the normally seen scepter. Then, although not of the zombie itself, there are actually some very early placeholder graphics of the fisherman zombie's string and hook that obviously don't go used. Like, the string here is literally just a straight line. But what is slightly interesting is that the hook seen here is a double one, instead of the single hook seen in the fisherman zombie's final design. Then, in addition to a bunch of the unused zombie types that I covered in my previous videos, there was a leak of some files in 2024 that revealed some more art and designs. For example, in my previous videos I covered some concept art for a thief zombie that was cut from the game. Well, in this leak, this art and some animations were discovered, revealing that I guess this here design was the one that was chosen, before I guess ultimately the decision was made to scrap this zombie. And yeah, based on how lacking in detail it looks, it doesn't seem like the thief's bag was ever finalized before the decision to cut was made. Interestingly though, these assets didn't go to complete waste, as this design of the thief zombie was actually used in the Chinese WeChat exclusive PVZ2 Renaissance Age game. The leak also contained some early line art of the scrapped blacksmith zombie, confirming that it was planned to use the design that we saw in the concept art for this game. There's some for the scrapped grave dropper zombie, where it can again be seen appearing as the placeholder blue-jacketed peasant zombie we discussed earlier, and yeah, it can be seen carrying around a placeholder tombstone graphic with the dark dev text on it. And while on the topic of tombstones, that's actually a good time to switch to chatting about some non-plant or zombie unused graphics, as there are actually numerous tombstone graphics that were made up for this game but just never ended up getting used. Almost every area has some tombstone graphics stylized for it, including 4 stages of degradation and even animations including them getting completely destroyed. Going in order, the Pirate Seas design would have had the tombstones covered in like seaweed as well as mostly eaten fish. The Wild West tombstone would feature a cow skull that would fall off as it degraded. Frostbite Caves tombstones would appear as snow-covered Inukshooks. Lost City's tombstones would take the design of a monument statue to the adventure zombies seen there. Far futures would be seen hovering with a screen that would flash the RIP text, and then, although the Dark Ages area does actually get some unique tombstones, there are also several placeholder graphics for them where they take on the design seen in the Ancient Egypt area, which is also the rare exception of a stage getting a unique tombstone design. As you can see though, unlike the rest, these Dark Ages placeholders also have some developer text overlaid on top of them. Dark was a placeholder for the default tombstones, Sun for the ones featuring the sun icon on them that give the player some sun when destroyed, which is seen in the game. This Zombstone one was planned to have similarly spawned a peasant zombie when destroyed. Then we got two identical looking placeholder tombstones with 3 blue question marks on them, one being a Mystery Sun tombstone, and the other a Mystery Zombie one, where, as the naming suggests, destroying these tombstones would apparently have been a gamble for the player, as destroying these could either give the player more sun, or otherwise spawn another zombie. Next, we have a shortcut placeholder tombstone, where the idea for these was that instead of zombies in the same lane as this tombstone, spawning from all the way on the right side of the lawn, they would instead be able to spawn from this tombstone, which would presumably have been quite a bit closer to the left side of the lawn. Next, we got a pea shooter gravestone with the word gift on it, and as the name suggests, destroying one of these babies would gift the player an extra pea shooter in its place. And then there's a time spawner tombstone, which would have had the effect of spawning an extra zombie 20 seconds after a level had started, and would continue to spawn another zombie every 10 seconds after. This would then keep going until the tombstone was either A, destroyed, or B, a total of 69 seconds have passed, after which this tombstone would self-destruct, and then also release several additional zombies. So obviously the intended strategy was to destroy these as quickly as possible. And in addition to just the base version of these time spawner tombstones, there are references to equivalent versions with different time values for conehead zombies as well as buckethead zombies. And then also a wide version of them too, which actually has some basic placeholder line art made up for them in clean as well as degraded states. And there are even some animations for these too, where they can be seen rattling, opening, as well as some destruction animations for them in both a closed and open state. There are also variants of these wide spawners for the conehead and buckethead zombies, and as you can see, the icon on the side of the tombstone changes from a crown to a triangle and then a square respectively. The time values between the regular and wide version of these gravestones appear to be the same, with the only difference seeming to be that these wide ones would take up 2 grid spaces on the lawn and couldn't be destroyed by gravebusters. And if you thought this art was basic, well, there are actually even earlier placeholder graphics for these wide tombs that just appear like this, with their damage level just slapped over top of them. Now, although we did get the sun and plant food effect tombstones in this game, I think the rest of these would have been super cool to see and would have definitely shaken up the gameplay of the Dark Ages stages even more. And that's not to mention the rest of the unused tombstones. I guess the developers didn't want having tombstones in every stage, which fair, and the theory is that these other tombstones were intended for a scrapped time twister area, which would have been the game's final area and would implement elements from all previous stages, essentially an early version of the modern day level. And also for the scrapped time twister area, in addition to the tombstones, there are unused minecart and rail graphics in the style of a few of the game's areas that are also believed to have been intended to be seen there, including these styles from Ancient Egypt, Pirate Seas, as well as these from Far Future. Then moving on, other unused graphics include this flagpole as well as 6 different flag designs, of which their exact intended purpose isn't currently known. There are assets for an early version of the arrow that points to the next level in the tutorial section. We got this little text bubble graphic that seems to be a leftover from a developer tool for editing dialogue. There's a placeholder for the Far Future trophy that uses the base seen on the upgrade trophies. There's this golden turkey or chicken key that was apparently intended for the food fight timed event. This golden plant pot goes unused. Next, we have an early seemingly placeholder design for the Dark Ages lawnmowers, where instead of the plow things here, we see them just appearing as a regular lawnmower from the player's house area, but with a knight helmet and lance strapped to it. And then we got an unused asset for the home in ancient Egypt being open. The doors never open in any of the levels in this game, so this seems to suggest that at some point in developing this game, there may have been plans for the doors to open, allowing the zombies to get in after the player loses, as was seen in the original Plants vs. Zombies. Now, we've seen a bunch of placeholder graphics already by this point, but none really so far as basic as this missing art sprite, referred to as missing art piece. And I love the extra touch of the crying emoticon on the bottom here. Next, there's this whole graphic that reveals plans for the intro tutorial section of the game to have had its own world map level select menu. This mockup definitely doesn't seem finished, and these green floating platforms meant for this world map are quite similar to those seen in the ancient Egypt world map, so it's quite possible that these were reworked and recolored for those. Now, ultimately, the tutorial never got a world map, and you just quickly transition between the intro levels. And additionally, there's also this note item that was planned to be obtained in the tutorial section that was cut. After obtained, this equally cut graphic showing the contents of the note would have been shown to the player, which would read, "Hello, this is your neighbor, the one with the face. I borrowed your weed whacker. Please come get it at your nowest convenience. Don't wear a hat. Signed, Larry?" Yeah, this clearly was written up by the zombies. Next up, we got various early graphics for the game's upgrades and power-ups, as well as even some that were cut from the game. For the early graphics, there's this one of the mower launch upgrade with some different looking wheels and shading. This unused graphic featuring a sunflower is believed to be an early version of the extra seed slot upgrade. This extra plant food trophy looks similar to its final counterpart, it just has the rings around it here, similar to the instant recharge upgrade. And then we also have this very early, super low-res version of the walnut first aid upgrade. It makes me wonder if the plan was originally to design all of the upgrade trophies like this one. And then for the upgrades that never made it to the game, we have power-up durations 1 and 2, both of which would increase the duration that power-ups are active, with presumably the second one making them last even longer. There's a valuable mowers upgrade that was cut, which would have doubled the amount of coins each remaining lawnmower drops upon level completion. And although it lacks assets like the others, there are also references to a bonus mower launch upgrade, which would have allowed the player to launch an extra lawnmower. Then for power-ups, there's a vase color changer that was cut, which defaults to the butter zombie power-up icon, and this would have allowed the player to change the color of a vase to reveal if there was a plant inside of it or not. And due to the similar effect, this was probably reworked into the reveal vase power-up. There's an unused cherry bomb power-up, which would have allowed the player to place cherry bombs anywhere they want, and based on leftover text, it looks like this was intended for the Pinata party mode. Then we also have a scrapped bacon collectible item that just defaults here to some placeholder X graphics with the almanac info for it. It's unclear what the purpose of this bacon was, if anything, but it would have cost the player 10 coins per unit. Now next up, there are several additional graphics that were cut meant for the game's user interface. These include an early version of the shovel button, and this could actually be seen in an early level UI mockup image, an unused world map button featuring some cards meant for the endless zones. There are several early UI graphics for the seed packets, including an early banner for the seeds being locked, and here we can see how these were meant to look when selected. And similarly, we have graphics for a bunch of menu buttons in blue and red, with the graphics for the combined blue buttons mistakenly being ordered incorrectly. Then we have this corrected blue button set as well as this green one, and these seem to have been meant to be seen on the stage completion screens, as they can also be seen in this concept mockup of one. And furthermore, there's also a whole set of sprites for this early pop-up menu too, where we can see various chunks including checkboxes, the continue button, and more. Next, we got some leftovers of a very early and basic loading animation. There are these placeholder black arrows pointing left and right, which unsurprisingly didn't end up getting used. And speaking of arrows, we also have these unused basic looking ones, which were grid objects meant for far future that would move zombies up or down a lane, and these ended up getting reworked into the Frostbite Caves slider tiles. And similarly, there's this placeholder sheep icon also meant for far future as a tile that, based on its name, Future Clone, would likely have cloned a zombie that stepped on it. And once again, also for far future, we got early power tile designs for all of the shapes, but notably, a few are different as the red and magenta shapes are swapped. And the same can also be said for these unused tiles that appear in the updated style that ended up getting implemented in the game. Then next, there's this low-res, realistic-looking key that's found in a folder titled HUD Minimap, so based on that, this may have been for some sort of minimap that was also cut. And we talked about the developer dialogue editor button earlier, but there's also this series of assets left over from some sort of cheat menu, including icons of a gem, stars, a coin, and more. Now, no such menu ended up getting implemented in the game, so it's unclear if this was just something the developers used for debugging and testing the game, or if there was ever any intentions for the player to be able to use a cheat menu, but with the prevalence of paid upgrades and such, I'm doubtful of the latter. And now, last up for this video, although in the release version, growing plants in the Zen Garden basically only unlocks the first strike ability for a boosted plant to instantly activate its plant food effect when planted, there were a few other plant boosts that ended up getting canned. These include Sun Discount, which does exactly what it sounds like, it would reduce the sun cost to plant a plant. Rapid Fire would increase fire rate, Fast Recharge would decrease planting recharge time, Bounty Hunter would have increased the odds of a zombie dropping coins when defeated, Shovel Bomb would have caused the boosted plant to explode in a 3x3 area when dug up, and this would deal a whole bunch of damage. There was a scrapped Marigold boost, which would have increased their chances of producing gems in the Zen Garden. And then finally, the scrapped Extra Toughness boost would increase the health of the boosted plant. Now, much like a bunch of the other ideas that were cut from this game, honestly, I think these other boosts would have been super nice to see, and it would have added some nice variety to just the plant food buff that ended up getting chosen. And my friends, we'll leave it there for Plants vs. Zombies 2, and I hope you enjoyed. Let me know which Plants vs. Zombies game in the series you'd like to see me cover on Lost Bits next. Check out some of my other Lost Bits videos, and be sure to subscribe to the channel with the notification bell to find your way back here in the future. And as always, thank you all so much for planting with us today, and I will see you in a bit.